Eleanor stood before the cracked full-length mirror in her cramped bedroom, smoothing the fabric of her only formal dress. A deep navy gown, its hem slightly frayed from years of careful wear. The dress clung to her frame, a relic from a time when she could afford to care about such things. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the neckline, her reflection blurring with the weight of exhaustion. 2 jobs, waitressing at the diner until midnight and cleaning offices before dawn, had carved lines into her face, lines that seemed deeper today. Bills piled on the kitchen counter, and the mortgage on the tiny apartment she'd scraped to buy for herself and her 8-year-old son, Milo, loomed like a storm cloud. "Mama, do I look fancy?" Milo's voice broke her reverie. He stood in the doorway tugging at the cuffs of his new suit, a charcoal grey ensemble that had cost Eleanor a paycheck. His dark curls were tamed for once and his eyes sparkled with pride. Eleanor knelt, her heart swelling. "You look like a prince, Milo." She adjusted his tie, her fingers lingering on the cheap fabric. "Ready to see Aunt Serena get married?" He nodded vigorously, his gap-toothed grin infectious. "Will there be cake? And dancing?" "Lots of both," she promised, though her stomach knotted. Serena's wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was a stage, one where Eleanor had always played the lesser role. Still, she'd come, for Milo, for the hope that today might stitch their fractured family back together. The venue was a vision of opulence, all silk drapes and champagne flutes clinking under crystal chandeliers. Eleanor sat in the 3rd row, her navy dress stark against the sea of designer gowns. She tucked her hands under her thighs, hiding chipped nails and the calluses earned from scrubbing floors. Beside her, Milo swung his legs under the table, his suit jacket already creased from fidgeting. He was oblivious to the glances, the whispers, the way some guests' eyes lingered on Elena's worn dress or Milo's slightly too short pants. "Look, Mama, Aunt Serena's like a princess," Milo whispered, pointing as Serena glided past in a cascade of white lace. Her younger sister was radiant, her laughter a melody that drew every eye. Serena had always been the star, beautiful, charming, the daughter their mother, Margaret, doted on. Eleanor had learned early to fade into the shadows, to nod and smile while Serena soaked up the spotlight. "She is," Elena murmured, forcing a smile. She clapped when Serena and her groom, a polished lawyer named Tucker, kissed, the crowd erupting in cheers. Milo clapped too, his small hands enthusiastic, believing this day was magic. But magic had a way of cutting deep. "Elena," Margaret's voice cut through the chatter. Her mother approached, resplendent in a tailored emerald dress, her hair swept into an elegant chignon. "Can't believe you made it. I wasn't sure you'd find the time." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Wouldn't miss it, Mom." She stood, brushing imaginary lint from her dress. "Milo's been excited all week." Margaret's gaze swept over Milo, softening briefly, but her eyes returned to Eleanor, sharp and appraising. "You could have borrowed something to wear, you know. Serena has closets full of dresses." The words landed like a slap. Eleanor forced a laugh, light and hollow. "This one's fine. It's an old favourite." The speeches began, a ripple of anticipation settling over the room. The groom's best friend, a lanky man with a practiced grin, went first, spinning light-hearted anecdotes about Tucker's college days that drew easy laughter from the crowd. Eleanor smiled faintly, her fingers tracing the stem of her water glass, trying to lose herself in the moment. Milo beside her giggled at a story about Tucker losing his shoes at a frat party, his small shoulders shaking with delight. For a fleeting second, Eleanor felt like they belonged. Then it was Serena's turn. Elena straightened, expecting something sentimental, perhaps a nod to love, or a memory of their childhood, the summers they'd spent chasing fireflies in their grandmother's backyard. She raised her glass in anticipation, her heart daring to hope. She should have known better. Serena stood at the center of the dance floor, lifting a crystal flute that caught the chandelier's light. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she began, her voice warm and glowing. "It means the world to Tucker and me. And, of course, I want to say something special about my older sister, Eleanor. Serena's gaze found them, and she smiled at Milo, who beamed back, his eyes wide with excitement. Elena's breath caught, a flicker of hope igniting. Maybe, just this once, Serena would see her, really see her. She's always been the luckiest of all, Serena continued, her tone bright. Now, a single mother, strong, independent, and clearly not needed by anyone else. The room erupted in laughter, a wave of amusement that crashed over Eleanor like ice water. Her stomach churned, her glass trembling in her hand. She thought she'd misheard, but Serena's smile never wavered, as if she'd delivered the cleverest quip. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, their smiles faltering, but most laughed louder, clinking glasses as if Elena's life were a punchline. Elena's face burned, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She didn't know where to look. Her lap, the tablecloth, the sea of faces now glancing her way with pity or amusement. Milo tugged at her sleeve, his voice a small, confused whisper. "Mama, why did she say that about you?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her throat was tight, her mind scrambling for an answer that wouldn't break his heart. Before she could respond, her mother's voice sliced through the noise. Margaret, seated at a nearby table, raised her glass with a smirk. "She's used material, but she still looks decent for her age." Eleanor forced a smile, leaning down to Milo to kiss his forehead. "It's just a silly joke, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice unsteady. "Don't worry." But her eyes stung, and her chest ached with the weight of it all. She wanted to stand, to walk out, to shield Milo from the cruelty disguised as humor. But her legs felt leaden, pinned by the weight of every laugh, every glance, every reminder that she was less in their eyes. Eleanor felt sick, a deep churning nausea that wasn't just from the laughter still echoing in her ears. After all these years, her family's disdain hadn't softened. It had sharpened, honed by a grudge they'd never let go. They disliked her, and the reason twisted the knife deeper. They blamed her for divorcing Michael. In their eyes, Michael was the golden son-in-law, charming, successful, the man who'd lifted Eleanor from her ordinary life into something they could brag about. To them, he was the best husband she could ever have, and she'd thrown him away like a fool. But the story wasn't that simple. It never had been. Behind the polished facade of their marriage, Michael's charm had masked control, his words sharp enough to cut, his expectations a cage. The late nights he claimed were work, the way he'd dismiss her dreams, her fears, her very voice. The night she'd found the texts on his phone, the ones that confirmed what she'd suspected for months, had been the breaking point. Leaving him had cost her everything, her family's approval, their support, the illusion of belonging. She'd chosen herself and Milo over a lie, but to them, she was the one who'd failed, the one who'd broken the perfect picture. 5 years ago, Elena and Michael had been the couple everyone envied. Michael, with his easy grin and tireless ambition, was on the cusp of something big. His tire shop, a modest venture he'd poured his savings into, had just secured a partnership with a major brand. Orders flooded in, customers lined up, and the local paper ran a glowing feature calling him Springfield's rising star. But as the shop grew, so did a shadow over their life. The change in Michael was slow at first, like a crack spreading in glass. He started coming home late, his clothes carrying the sharp tang of whiskey, though he'd never been a drinker before. Some nights, he didn't come home at all, his phone going straight to voicemail. Eleanor would lie awake, Milo's soft breathing her only comfort, replaying her unanswered texts. "Where are you? Call me." When he did show up, often at dawn, he'd brush off her questions with a weary wave. "I'm building the business, Elle. Meeting partners, shaking hands. You wouldn't get it." His voice, once warm, grew clipped, his eyes dodging hers. At first, Elena tried to understand. The partnership was demanding, late dinners with distributors, trips to meet suppliers, paperwork that kept him at the shop until midnight. She'd pack him lunches, leave notes on the fridge. "Proud of you." Come home soon. But the lunches came back untouched, the notes ignored. One night, she found a receipt in his jacket pocket, $200 at a downtown bar, time-stamped 2 a.m. When she asked, he snapped, "It's business, Elena. You think I'm out there having fun?" His anger was new, a stranger in their home, and it left her silent, clutching Milo a little tighter. The distance grew. Michael's success, once their shared dream, became a wall between them. Once he returned from a meeting with lipstick on his collar, swearing it was a client's overzealous wife. She wanted to believe him, to hold on to the man who'd promised her forever, but doubt gnawed at her. By the time Elena confronted Michael, the man she'd loved was a ghost. "Who is she?" she asked, holding up his phone, her voice trembling but steady. He didn't deny it, didn't even flinch. "You're suffocating me, Elle," he said, his tone cold. "I need space to be someone." The argument that followed shattered what was left, his accusations that she was holding him back, her pleas for the truth, the slamming door as he left. Eleanor's conviction that Michael was cheating had hardened into unshakable truth, though the who remained a maddening mystery. As she grappled with what to do, another shift was unfolding, one that twisted the knife deeper. Michael, once distant from her family, had suddenly become their golden son-in-law, weaving himself into the fabric of their lives with calculated charm. He started visiting her mother, Margaret, arriving with lavish gifts: a crystal vase, a cashmere shawl, a bottle of aged wine that cost more than Elena's weekly grocery budget. Margaret, who'd always prized status over sentiment, lapped it up, her eyes gleaming as she showed off Michael's offerings to her book club friends. "He's such a catch," she'd say, her voice dripping with pride, as if Eleanor's marriage was her own achievement. Serena, too, was swept up in Michael's orbit. He'd paid for her and her friends to jet off to Paris for a week, a trip that filled Serena's social media with sunlit cafes and Eiffel Tower selfies. For her 23rd birthday, he gifted her a designer handbag, its leather butter soft, and its logo gleaming, the kind of bag Eleanor could never dream of affording. Serena squealed, hugging him like he was her personal hero. It was all too convenient, too perfectly timed. This was the same period when Michael's tire shops were exploding across the state, his name synonymous with success, and when Eleanor's suspicions of his infidelity were at their peak. The gifts, the trips, the charm. It wasn't love for her family. It was strategy. Eleanor saw it clearly. Michael was buying their loyalty, ensuring that if she dared to leave him, her family would side with the man who'd showered them with luxury. A divorce would tarnish his image, the golden entrepreneur who could do no wrong and threaten the empire he was building. He was expunging himself in their eyes, painting her as the problem before she could speak her truth. At home, the distance between them was a chasm. Michael barely touched her, his hands no longer seeking hers, his eyes sliding past her like she was invisible. The rejection seeped into her bones, making her feel small, unworthy, a shadow of the woman he'd once danced with in their kitchen. She'd catch her reflection in the bathroom mirror, tracing the curves childbirth had left, the wideness Michael had thrown in her face, and hate herself for caring what he thought. But worse than his indifference was the betrayal, the condoms, the texts, the lies he didn't even bother to disguise anymore. Eleanor had never cheated. From the day they'd married, her heart had been his alone. Other men didn't exist in her world. She'd never so much as glanced at anyone else. She'd built her life around Michael, around Milo, around the promise of forever. So why, she thought, her resolve hardening, should I settle for a man who can't be faithful? Why live in a marriage that's a lie just because he buys my family's love? The decision came one quiet night, Milo asleep in his room, the apartment heavy with the silence of another evening. Michael hadn't come home. Elena sat at the kitchen table, a divorce attorney's card in her hand, her thumb tracing the embossed letters. Filing for divorce would cost her. Her family's approval, their support, the illusion of a perfect life. Margaret would call her a fool. Serena would roll her eyes. but staying would cost her soul, and she'd already given too much. She filed the papers the next week, her heart pounding as she signed her name. Michael's reaction was cold fury, his voice low and venomous. "You're ruining everything," he hissed, as if she was the one who'd broken their vows. The fallout from Elena's decision to divorce Michael hit like a storm, and her mother Margaret was the first to unleash her fury. The phone call came the day after Elena filed the papers, Margaret's voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're throwing away everything, Elena. This is your fault. Michael cheated because you didn't keep him happy. Men make mistakes, you know that. Forgive him, forget it, and fix your marriage before it's too late." Eleanor gripped the phone, her knuckles white, shock and rage warring in her chest. "My fault?" she said, her voice trembling. "He betrayed me, Mom. He lied, he cheated, and you're blaming me?" Margaret didn't miss a beat. "You're too sensitive, always have been. You should be grateful for a man like Michael. Do you know how many women would kill for what you have?" The words stung worse than Elena could have imagined, coming from her own mother. She'd expected disappointment, maybe even judgment, but this was betrayal. Days later, the truth sharpened the wound. Eleanor stopped by Margaret's house to drop off Milo and saw workers installing gleaming quartz countertops and custom cabinets in the kitchen. When she asked how Margaret could afford it, her mother's eyes flicked away. "Michael offered to cover it," she mumbled. "He's generous, Elena. You're making a mistake." The realization hit like a slap. Michael's money was buying Margaret's loyalty, renovating her kitchen while he shattered Elena's life. Every gift, every check, was a brick in the wall he'd built to keep her family on his side. Serena's reaction was just as brutal. When she heard about the divorce, she called Elena in a huff, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're such an idiot, Elena. Michael's the kind of man every woman dreams of, and you're throwing him away like he's nothing. You're ungrateful, taking everything for granted. You were lucky to even get a guy like him in the first place, and now you'll never find anyone half as good." Eleanor's jaw dropped, her sister's words slicing through her. "Lucky," she shot back. "He cheated on me, Serena. He lied, he humiliated me, and you're calling me ungrateful?" Serena scoffed. "So he made a mistake. Big deal. You don't just walk away from a man like Michael. You're going to regret this, Elena. You're not exactly a catch anymore." The cruelty of it, Serena's dismissal, her implication that Elena was less than unworthy of loyalty, pushed Elena past her breaking point. She couldn't take it anymore, the way her mother and sister twisted the truth to protect Michael, their golden benefactor. That night, she confronted them both at Margaret's house, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. "You're both cheap," Eleanor said, her eyes blazing as she faced Margaret and Serena in the newly renovated kitchen. "Materialistic, shallow, and blind. You're defending Michael, blaming me because he buys you things, kitchen upgrades, Paris trips, designer bags. You've traded me, your daughter, your sister, for his money. You don't care about me or what he did. You care about what he can give you." Margaret's face reddened, her mouth opening to protest, but Eleanor cut her off. "Don't. I see you, Mom. You're so dazzled by his wallet you can't even pretend to care about your own daughter." Serena crossed her arms, her lips curling. "That's rich coming from you. You're just jealous Michael likes us better." "Likes you?" Eleanor laughed, bitter and sharp. "He's using you to save his image, and you're letting him. You're both pathetic." The room fell silent, the weight of Elena's words hanging heavy. Margaret clutched her wine glass, her eyes hard but flickering with something like shame. Serena stormed out, muttering about Elena's ingratitude. But Eleanor felt no regret, only a raw, aching clarity. She'd lost her family to Michael's manipulation, but she'd gained something more, the truth and the strength to walk away. 3 years had passed since Elena divorced Michael, 3 years of sparse texts and stilted holiday calls with her family. Communication had dwindled to bare civility, Margaret's curt birthday messages, Serena's occasional selfies with no reply to Eleanor's responses. Serena's wedding had seemed like a fragile bridge, a chance to mend the rift with the only family Eleanor had left. She'd come with a flicker of hope, dressing Milo in his little suit, smoothing her worn navy gown, believing that Elena's instinct screamed to flee, to grab Milo's hand and walk out, leaving the silk-draped venom of this wedding behind forever. Then, a chair scraped against the polished floor, the sound cutting through the fading laughter. Tucker, Serena's groom, stood slowly, his broad shoulders tense, his jaw set. He didn't look pleased, didn't spare a glance for Serena's radiant smile or the guests' expectant faces. His eyes, sharp and steady, found Elena's across the room, pinning her in place. The chatter stilled, glasses paused mid-clink, as if the air itself held its breath. Tucker's expression wasn't pity or anger. It was something else, something resolute, and in that moment, Eleanor felt the room shift. Tucker stood, one hand steady on the table, the other gripping the microphone so tightly his knuckles whitened. His eyes locked onto Eleanor's. Not Serena's, not Margaret's, not the crowd still chuckling behind their champagne flutes, but hers alone. For a fleeting moment, Eleanor braced for a joke, a charming deflection to smooth over the jagged edges of her family's cruelty. That's what they always did, glossed over pain, called it humour, buried it under the rug of tradition. But Tucker's face held no trace of a smile. His jaw was set, his expression a storm of emotions. Anger, yes, but laced with something deeper. A mix of disbelief and quiet outrage that silenced the room's lingering laughter. Eleanor's hand tightened around Milo's, her resolve hardening. She pushed her chair in, the soft scrape barely audible, and guided Milo to his feet. She wouldn't let them see her break, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of her tears or her defeat. Her worn navy dress swished as she took a step toward the exit, Milo's small hand warm in hers. But Tucker's voice cut through the air, low and unshakable. "Elena, don't go." She froze, her breath catching. Every head in the room swiveled to Tucker, a murmur rippling through the guests like wind stirring dry leaves. Serena stiffened in her lace gown, her smile a brittle mask. Margaret's eyes narrowed to slits, her wineglass paused halfway to her lips. Tucker raised a hand, his authority quiet but absolute. His gaze never left Elena, anchoring her in place. "I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened," Tucker said, his voice steady, each word deliberate. "I won't stand here and let cruelty pass as a joke." The silence thickened, heavy as fog, the clink of glasses and rustle of silk stilled. Tucker stepped from behind the head table, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. Each step was measured, as if he were pushing through the weight of the room's expectations. He stopped beside Elena and Milo's table, where their untouched salad plates sat, and turned to face the sea of guests. "Eleanor's not just a guest here," he continued, his voice rising just enough to carry. "She's family. She's a mother who's fought harder than most of us could ever understand. She's raised Milo. Look at him, this incredible kid, through challenges none of you have bothered to ask about." He glanced at Milo, who clutched Eleanor's hand, his eyes wide but flickering with something like awe. "And yet, tonight, you laughed. You mocked her. You made her feel small on a day that's supposed to be about love." Serena's face flushed, her fingers twisting the stem of her flute. Margaret set her glass down with a sharp clink, her lips parting to protest, but Tucker's stare silenced her. He turned back to Eleanor, his expression softening, though the fire in his eyes remained. "You don't deserve this, Eleanor. Not from them, not from anyone. I'm sorry for what was said, for what wasn't stopped. You're stronger than they'll ever know." Eleanor's throat tightened, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. Milo pressed closer, his small body warm against her side, his confusion easing under Tucker's words. The room was a blur of faces, some shocked, some uncomfortable, a few nodding faintly. But Tucker's voice was a lifeline, pulling her from the shame her family had draped over her. Tucker's voice carried a quiet intensity, each word slicing through the gilded haze of the reception. For the past year, while we planned this wedding, I heard a lot about family, he said, his eyes sweeping the room before settling back on Elena. About appearances, traditions, loyalty. But what I just saw wasn't family. It was mockery dressed up as a celebration. The crowd shifted, a restless unease settling over the silk-draped tables. Some guests exchanged glances, others stared into their champagne flutes, their earlier laughter now a sour memory. Margaret's face was a mask of stone, her fingers tight around her glass, while Serena's radiant glow dimmed, her eyes darting nervously. Tucker turned to Serena, his gaze unflinching. You ridiculed your sister for raising a child alone, with no one's help. You laughed, and worse, you made her son watch it. Serena's lips parted, a protest forming, but no sound came. Tucker didn't wait. She didn't ask for that life, but she's handled it. She came today, sat at the back of the room, smiled, brought her son to witness your big day, and you turned it into a punchline. Eleanor had never seen Serena look so small, her sister's confidence crumbling under the weight of Tucker's words. The room, the clink of glasses and hum of chatter gone. Tucker faced the guests again, his voice steady but heavy with conviction. She didn't come up here to defend herself. She didn't ask for pity. She's never needed the stage. But I won't stay silent, because if I'm joining a family where cruelty is humor and shame is tradition, I need to question what kind of man I want to be. Eleanor's throat tightened, her heart caught between gratitude and disbelief. She'd come to Serena's wedding braced for judgment, expecting to endure the night as she always had, silently, with dignity, for Milo's sake. She'd never imagined someone would defend her, least of all Tucker, the polished groom who barely knew her. His words were a shield, unexpected and unasked for, and they stirred something in her, a spark of strength she'd buried under years of her family's disdain. Tucker set the microphone down, the soft thud a final note in his rebuke. When he left the reception hall, it was as if a switch had been flipped, plunging the room into a stunned hush. No one clapped, no one cheered. The only sounds were the faint hum of the air conditioner overhead and the sharp clink of a spoon against a glass, dropped by a guest too shocked to hold it steady. Faces froze, eyes darting between Eleanor, Serena, and the heavy oak door Tucker had exited through, its thud still echoing in the silence. The glittering veneer of the wedding, silk tablecloths, champagne flutes, the glow of chandeliers, seemed to dim, exposed as hollow in the wake of his words. Serena stood at the head table, her lace gown no longer a beacon of radiance but a weight dragging her down. Her perfect posture crumbled, shoulders sagging, her face pale as if she'd been struck. She scanned the room, searching for the adoring smiles that had greeted her all night, but they were gone. Some guests looked shocked, their mouths slightly agape, others flushed with embarrassment, fidgeting with napkins or staring at their plates. A few, their brows furrowed, seemed angry, not at Tucker but at her, their whispers carrying a new edge. The room she'd commanded with her charm now judged her in silence. Margaret was the first to break the stillness, her abrupt movement jarring the quiet. Her chair screeched against the polished hardwood as she stood, her emerald dress catching the light like armor. She turned to Serena, her eyes blazing, but her voice, usually a whip, cracked with uncertainty. "You ungrateful, selfish fool," she snapped, her words aimed at her daughter but lacking their usual venom. "You've disgraced us in front of everyone." The accusation hung in the air, but it fell flat, unanswered, stripped of the authority Margaret had wielded so effortlessly before. The room didn't rally to her. No one nodded in agreement. Her command had vanished, dissolved by Tucker's unflinching truth. Eleanor stood motionless, Milo's small hand warm in hers, her worn navy dress a quiet defiance against the opulence around her. For the first time, Margaret's piercing glare didn't shrink her. The weight of years, her mother's blame, her sister's mockery, the family's dismissal, slid off her shoulders like a discarded cloak. She didn't respond to Margaret's outburst. She didn't need to. Tucker's words had carved out a space for her to stand taller, to see herself not as the failure they'd painted, but as a woman who'd endured and overcome. She straightened, her chin lifting, and squeezed Milo's hand gently. "Come on, buddy," she said softly, her voice steady, a lighthouse in the storm. She turned toward the exit, her steps deliberate, Milo's sneakers scuffing beside her. The crowd parted silently, a sea of faces caught between shame and awe. Some guests avoided her gaze, their eyes dropping to the floor as if confronted by their own complicity. Outside, the night air was crisp, a balm against the sting of the reception's cruelty. The distant hum of traffic and the soft glow of streetlights welcomed them, a world untouched by silk and champagne. Eleanor glanced back once, the venue's golden light spilling through the windows, but it held no pull. Eleanor glanced around, her eyes searching the dimly lit parking lot for Tucker, hoping to catch him before they left. But the lot was empty, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows over parked cars. As they rounded the building, she spotted a figure leaning against the wall, a faint curl of smoke rising into the air. Tucker stood there, alone, a cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. His tie was loosened, his suit jacket draped over one arm, and his face, lit by the flicker of the cigarette, held a mix of resolve and weariness. "Tucker," Eleanor said, her voice catching. She stepped closer, Milo clinging to her side. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to ruin everything, for you, for Serena, for the wedding. I never wanted this." Her words tumbled out, heavy with guilt, her free hand twisting the hem of her worn navy dress. I'm so sorry." Tucker exhaled a slow plume of smoke, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. He shook his head, a faint, rueful smile tugging at his lips. "Eleanor, stop. You don't need to apologize for a damn thing." He dropped the cigarette, grinding it out with his heel, and straightened, his voice steady. "If anything, I should thank you. You coming here, showing up despite everything. You helped me see the true face of the person I was supposed to marry. That's worth more than a perfect wedding." Eleanor blinked, her throat tightening. "No, it's me who needs to thank you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I haven't had anyone on my side in a long time, Tucker. Not like that. What you said in there." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "It made me feel seen, like I mattered. It felt good, really good." Milo looked up, his small face curious. "You're the man who said Mama's strong," he said, his voice bright despite the late hour. Tucker crouched to Milo's level, his smile warm. "That's right, kid. Your Mama's the strongest person I know. Don't ever forget that." He ruffled Milo's curls, then stood, his gaze returning to Eleanor. "You don't owe me anything, Eleanor. You've been carrying enough. Just keep being you." Eleanor's eyes stung, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you, Tucker. I mean it. And I'm sorry again, for everything. I hope things work out for you, whatever happens next." He nodded, his expression unreadable but kind. "They will, one way or another. You take care of yourself and this little guy, okay?" She nodded back, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "We will." The fallout from Serena's wedding was swift and final. Tucker and Serena's relationship, once the centerpiece of the glittering celebration, unraveled within weeks. Whispers from mutual acquaintances reached Eleanor. Serena's tearful arguments, Tucker's quiet resolve, the irreparable fracture laid bare by his public stand. The perfect couple draped in silk and champagne was no more, their love unable to withstand the truth Tucker had forced into the open. In the days that followed, Eleanor's phone buzzed with calls from Margaret and Serena, their names flashing like warnings. She let them go to voicemail, her heart too raw to face their voices. The messages they left were venomous, Margaret's voice sharp with indignation. "You've ruined everything, Elena, as always." And Serena's laced with betrayal. "He ate me on my day." Texts followed, each one nastier than the last, accusing her of orchestrating the scene, of being selfish, ungrateful, a stain on their family. "You're nothing without us," Serena wrote in one, the words cutting despite Eleanor's resolve. She read the first few, her hands trembling, but by the third day she'd had enough. Their words were echoes of the wedding's cruelty, a reminder that her family's love was conditional, tied to Michael's money and their own pride. Sitting at her kitchen table, Milo asleep in his room, Eleanor blocked their numbers with a steady hand. The silence that followed was heavy but freeing, like closing a door on a storm. She didn't need their accusations, their blame. She had Milo, her small apartment, her hard-won life, and that was enough. Weeks later, as she and Milo decorated their tiny living room with paper snowflakes for the holidays, Eleanor felt the weight of her family's absence but not its sting. Commutes to work, the late-night shifts, the laughter shared with Milo over popcorn and movies. They were her world now, untainted by silk or scorn. Eleanor's life began anew, a quiet rebirth unshackled from the weight of her family's approval. For the first time, she moved through her days without the nagging doubt of whether Margaret or Serena would accept her, without the ache of hoping for their love. She knew with a clarity that settled deep in her bones that they would likely never speak again. The truth of it hurt. A sharp, lingering pang for the mother who'd chosen wealth over her, the sister who'd traded loyalty for luxury. But what could she do? She couldn't change them, couldn't undo their cruelty. All she could do was accept it and live on. And so she did. Her world, small but fiercely hers, revolved around Milo and the life they were building. The tiny apartment, with its creaky floors and second-hand couch, became a sanctuary. Eleanor kept her 2 jobs, waitressing at the diner and cleaning offices before dawn, but the exhaustion felt lighter now, purposeful. One grey morning, Elena's old Subaru refused to start. The engine coughed, sputtered, then fell silent, leaving her stranded in the apartment complex's cracked parking lot. The car had never let her down before, its rattling dependability a quiet constant through her and Milo's new life. She stood by the driver's door, key in hand, her breath fogging in the chilly air, and felt a knot tighten in her chest. She called the local shop, her voice steady as she asked for help, but the mechanic's words hit like a blow. $150 just to diagnose the problem, money she didn't have. Her savings were stretched thin, every dollar already spoken for. Rent, Milo's school supplies, the electric bill looming. The Subaru was a relic years ago from a friend for $1,000, a steal despite its 300,000 miles. Its faded green paint was chipped, the seats worn to threads, and the audio system had been dead since the day she got it, leaving her drives filled with Milo's chatter or her own thoughts. But it ran, ferrying her to the diner, the office cleaning gig, and Milo's school without complaint. Now it sat lifeless, a betrayal she couldn't afford. Eleanor popped the hood, the hinges groaning, and stared at the tangle of wires, the grimy engine, the maze of parts she didn't understand. She wasn't a mechanic. Her skills were in balancing budgets, soothing Milo's fears, surviving. Tools weren't her language, and the helplessness stung. She sank onto the curb beside the car, the cold asphalt biting through her jeans, and then, without warning, the tears came. They spilled hot and fast, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. She wasn't crying for the car, though its failure was a fresh wound. She wasn't crying for the money she didn't have, or even for the years of cruelty from her family. No, the tears came from somewhere deeper, a flood of memories she hadn't touched in years. Her father, Ben, filled her mind, his calloused hands and warm laugh as vivid as if he were standing beside her. Ben had been the only person in her family who loved without conditions, who saw everyone, Eleanor, Serena, even Margaret equally, never measuring them by their successes or failures. A carpenter by trade, he'd been a hard-working, simple man, his flannel shirts always dusted with sawdust, his eyes crinkling when he smiled. He'd died when Elena was 18, A heart attack that stole him too soon, leaving her with a family that valued appearances over heart. Ben would have hated what Margaret and Serena became, would have stood up for Eleanor when Michael's betrayal and her family's scorn tried to break her. Eleanor stood by her broken Subaru, the hood propped open, its engine a puzzle of wires and metal she couldn't decipher. The sight stirred a memory, sharp and bittersweet, of her father on the day she got her first car in high school, a beat-up hatchback with peeling blue paint. Ben had stood in their driveway, his flannel shirt sleeves rolled up, pointing at the engine's parts with a wrench in hand. "This here's the carburetor, Elle. Spark plugs are over there," he'd said, his voice patient as he explained how it all worked. But Elena, 16 and buzzing with excitement, barely listened, her mind on the open road, the thrill of her new freedom. She'd nodded, half hearing, eager to slide. If Ben were alive, he'd have this Subaru purring in an hour. He'd tinker with a grin, crack a corny joke. "This car's just playing possum, Elle," and make the grief, the weight of her family's betrayal, vanish in an instant. His laugh, warm and rumbling, had always been her safe harbour. Eleanor missed him fiercely, the ache of his absence a quiet companion in moments like this. 5 hours after Eleanor posted the Subaru for sale online, her phone rang. A gruff voice introduced himself as Raymond, saying he wanted to check the car, maybe fix it, and buy it if it was salvageable. "Saw the price?" he said. "Thought it's my shot to get something reliable." Eleanor agreed, and the next morning, a man around 65 pulled up to her apartment complex, leaning on a wooden cane. His face was weathered, his eyes kind but tired, framed by a grey baseball cap. "Name's Raymond," he said, offering a calloused hand. "Veteran, on disability. Back pain's got me, so I can't walk far. Been hoofing it to work too long. Your car might be my ticket." Eleanor nodded, gesturing to the Subaru. "Why I'm selling? I don't know how much it'll cost to fix, and I can't afford surprises right now. Figured I'd sell it, save up for something else later." Raymond limped to the hood, his cane tapping the asphalt, and peered inside. His hands moved with a quiet confidence, tracing wires, checking connections. Eleanor stood nearby, Milo at her side, watching as Raymond muttered to himself, his fingers probing the engine's depths. After a few minutes, he straightened, a faint smile breaking through. "Spark plugs," he said, tapping the engine. "They're shot. Bet that's why she won't start. I can grab new ones from the auto shop down the road, cheap fix." Eleanor shrugged, her hope tempered by doubt. "If you think it'll work, go for it." Raymond nodded and drove off in his friend's borrowed truck, returning 20 minutes later with a small bag of spark plugs. He set to work, his movements slow but sure, replacing the faulty plugs with a precision that reminded her of Ben. When he turned the key, the Subaru roared to life, its engine humming smoothly, as if it had never betrayed her. Milo clapped, bouncing on his toes. "It's fixed, Mama," Raymond chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag. "She's a good car, Elena. No need to sell her. Plugs cost me $8, that's all." He leaned on his cane, his eyes meeting hers. "Can't buy her now, not when you need her. Keep her running." Eleanor glanced at Milo, his eyes bright with the thrill of the engine's revival, and then back at Raymond, leaning on his cane, his weathered face kind but tired. She hesitated, then asked, "Where do you work, Raymond?" He adjusted his cap, his voice gruff but warm. "At a warehouse crosstown. Keep records of incoming packages, mostly paperwork. Ain't glamorous, but it pays the bills." Eleanor nodded, her mind made up. "I'm going ahead with the sale," she said, her tone firm. "You need this car more than I do. Walking to work with your back pain, that's no way to live." Raymond's eyes widened, his hand tightening on his cane. "Eleanor, you don't have to do that. Car's fine now. Keep it for you and the boy." She shook her head, a small smile breaking through. "I'd give it away even cheaper, Raymond, but things aren't perfect for me either. You need it. Take it." Her voice softened, but her resolve was iron, forged by years of scraping by, of knowing what it meant to need a break. Raymond's shoulders sagged, gratitude softening his features. He reached out, his calloused hand shaking hers firmly. "You don't know what this means, Elena. Truly." His voice cracked, and he cleared his throat, blinking hard. "Been a long time since someone did something like this for me." He called his friend. The friend drove off in the truck, and Raymond slid into the Subaru's driver's seat, the engine purring as he pulled away. Elena watched the taillights fade, Milo's hand in hers, a quiet pride settling in her chest. But minutes later, as Eleanor and Milo sat on the curb in front of their apartment complex, the Subaru's familiar rumble returned. Raymond pulled up, climbed out, and limped toward them, his cane tapping the asphalt. "Elena, I can't take it," he said, his voice thick. "Not from a single mom, not when you and the boy need it." Eleanor laughed, a mix of disbelief and warmth. "No, Raymond, you bought it. It's yours. Take it." He shook his head, stubborn as stone. "Can't do it. Car's yours. I'll manage." Eleanor laughed and reached into her pocket, pulling out the $750 he'd given her for the sale. He hesitated, then split the bills, pressing half into her hand. "Take this. You need it too. Don't argue." His tone was firm, but his eyes were soft, a stranger offering more kindness than her family ever had. Eleanor stared at the money, her breath catching. "What? You can't just—" She laughed again, shaking her head, the absurdity and generosity overwhelming her. "Raymond, you're something else." He grinned, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "Been called worse." She looked at him, then at Milo, who was watching with a shy smile. "At least let me make you a sandwich and some coffee," she said, her voice earnest. "It's not much, but it's what I can give for this." She gestured to the money, the car, the moment. Raymond hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Coffee sounds good." They walked into her small apartment, the scent of yesterday's soup lingering in the air. Eleanor set Milo up with crayons at the kitchen table, then brewed coffee and made sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly, simple but hearty. As they sat, the conversation flowed easily. Raymond shared his story. A veteran living alone in a small, battered house, his days filled with warehouse work and quiet evenings. Eleanor opened up too, telling him about Milo, her night classes, the family that had turned their backs after her divorce. She didn't mention the wedding's cruelty, but Raymond seemed to sense the weight of it, his nods quiet and understanding. "You're a tough one," he said, sipping his coffee. "Raising that boy right, keeping on. That's no small thing." She smiled, warmth spreading through her. Takes one to know one. When Raymond stood to leave, his cane steady in his hand, Eleanor stopped him at the door. "Why don't we share the car?" she said, the idea sudden but right. "Whenever you need it, for work, errands, you take it, bring it back when you're done. It's yours too." His eyes widened, then softened. "You sure about that, Elena?" "Positive," she said, her voice firm. "We'll make it work." Raymond's grin was slow, genuine. "Deal." Just like that, a new friendship was born. Eleanor and Raymond's friendship blossomed quietly, their shared car arrangement weaving their lives together. They texted about pickup times, swapped stories over quick coffee stops, and found comfort in the easy rhythm of their connection. One sunny Saturday, Raymond invited Elena and Milo to his small house, a modest bungalow with... "Ain't much," he said as they arrived, his cane tapping the cracked walkway. "But the backyard's my pride and joy." He led them to a tidy vegetable patch, rows of tomatoes, zucchini, and green beans thriving under his care. "Keeps me from going stir-crazy," he said, crouching to pluck a ripe tomato and handing it to Milo. "When I'm alone, this patch gives me something to talk to." His chuckle was warm, but Eleanor caught the flicker of loneliness in his eyes, a mirror to the isolation she'd felt before their paths crossed. They ordered pizzas, the scent of pepperoni filling the cramped living room, and sprawled on Raymond's worn couch. He pulled out a dusty photo album, its pages yellowed but cherished, and showed Milo pictures from his Navy days. Black and white shots captured a younger Raymond, lean and proud, aboard a battleship, the ocean vast behind him. Milo's eyes widened, his questions tumbling out. "Did you fight pirates? Were you ever scared?" Raymond laughed, spinning tales of stormy seas and close calls, his voice rich with memory. On one page, a faded photo showed a man holding a little boy on his lap, both smiling under a summer sun. Milo pointed. "Who's that?" Raymond's smile softened, his fingers tracing the image. "That's me and my son Tommy, when he was about your age, Milo." His voice was quiet, heavy with something unspoken. "Where's he now?" Milo asked, his curiosity innocent but piercing. Raymond's gaze drifted to the window, his eyes distant. "I don't know. Haven't seen him in near 20 years, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor caught the weight in his words, her heart aching for the story behind them. Later, as the sun dipped low and they sat in folding chairs in the backyard, she gently broached the topic. Milo was busy chasing a butterfly, giving them a moment alone. "Raymond," she said carefully, "when you talked about your son, it sounded like there's a lot there." He chuckled, a sound more sad than bitter, and leaned back, his cane resting against his knee. "Got a small secret, I suppose," he said, his eyes on the horizon. "When I saw you and Milo, it hit me hard. Reminded me of Tommy and his mum, back when I was young and dumb. I abandoned them, not because I didn't love them, but because I thought my service to this country was everything." He shook his head, his voice rough. "The Navy took me away, months, years at a time. My wife Clara got tired of it, of waiting for a man who was never there. One day, she said she was done. I was cocky, told her to do what she wanted. Didn't think she'd actually leave." Eleanor listened, her hands wrapped around a cooling coffee mug, seeing the regret etched in his face. "What happened?" she asked softly. Raymond's jaw tightened. "I got hurt. Fell off a moving supply truck during a drill. Messed up my back bad. Spent 6 months bedridden, a year in a wheelchair, relearning how to walk. Hardest thing I ever did, fighting through that pain. But the country I served? Didn't care much. A few medals, a small pension, and I was on my own. By the time I was back on my feet, Clara and Tommy were gone. She probably remarried, moved cross-country. I didn't fight for 'em like I should have. Too proud, too broken." He paused, his eyes glistening. "Seeing you with Milo, how you fight for him, it's like looking at what I could have been. Makes me wish I'd done better." Eleanor reached out, touching his arm. "You're doing better now, Raymond. You fixed my car, gave us a piece of your heart. That's not nothing." He smiled, faint but genuine. "Maybe. Still wish I could tell Tommy I'm sorry." The drive home from Raymond's house was quiet, the Subaru's hum filling the space as dusk painted the sky in soft purples. Eleanor's mind lingered on Raymond's story, his regret over losing Tommy, while Milo stared out the window, his usual chatter subdued. Then, breaking the silence, he said, "Mama, I feel like I've seen Tommy somewhere." Eleanor glanced at him, curious, a smile tugging at her lips. "Sweetheart, you might be mixing him up with someone who looks like him. It happens." Milo shook his head, insistent. "No, I'm sure. I've seen him before." His certainty sent a prickle of concern through Eleanor. She didn't press, but his words stayed with her, a puzzle she couldn't quite place. The next visit to Raymond's, while he and Milo tended the vegetable patch, Eleanor slipped inside to the living room. Her fingers found the photo album, flipping to the faded picture of Raymond holding young Tommy, both smiling under a summer sun. She studied Tommy's face, the wide eyes, the dimpled grin, and her breath caught. The resemblance was uncanny, a memory clicking into place. Her heart raced as she snapped a photo with her phone, the pieces falling together in a way she hadn't expected. Back home, Elena knew what she had to do, though it meant swallowing her pride. She dialed Serena's number, her stomach knotting at the thought of her sister's voice. Serena answered with a curt, "What do you Wayne?" Her tone was sharp, laced with the same arrogance. "I need Tucker's contact info," Elena said, keeping her voice steady. "It's important. Serena's laugh was bitter. Tucker, how dare you ask for him after what you did? Her voice rose, a tirade building. You ruined my wedding, my life, and now you want to drag him back into your mess? It's not what you think, Elena cut in, her patience thin but her resolve firm. This isn't about me or you. It's for someone else. Please, Serena, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical. Serena paused, suspicion heavy in her silence. Fine, she snapped. I'll give you his number, but only if you tell him I miss him and want to get back together. Eleanor agreed, knowing Tucker's heart was no longer open to Serena. She called Tucker that evening, her nerves jangling as she asked to meet. They arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop, the kind with mismatched chairs and warm lighting. When Tucker arrived, his face was guarded but kind, the same steady presence from the wedding. Eleanor slid her phone across the table, the photo of Raymond and young Tommy glowing on the screen. Tucker's eyes widened, his hand freezing mid-reach for his coffee. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice low, urgent. Eleanor told him everything. Raymond, the Subaru, the vegetable patch, the photo album, the story of a father's regret. He's your dad, isn't he? He calls you Tommy. He misses you, Tucker. He says the one thing he wants before he's gone is to tell you he's sorry. Tucker stared at the photo, his jaw tight, emotions flickering across his face, shock, anger, a buried longing. My mom changed my name to Tucker after she left him, he said finally, his voice rough. Said it was to protect me, to cut ties with a man who chose the Navy over us. I hated him for so long, Elena. A moment later he added, but I've missed him too. She leaned forward, her voice soft but pleading. Meet him. Just once. For his birthday, I'm planning a dinner. You could be there. Surprise him. He doesn't know. Tucker hesitated, his fingers tracing the phone's edge. I don't know if I can forgive him, he admitted, but his eyes softened. All right. For you and for him, I'll do it. Eleanor spent the next week preparing, her small apartment filled with the scent of roasting chicken and fresh-baked cornbread for Raymond's birthday dinner. She and Milo set the table with their best mismatched plates, a candle flickering in the center. Raymond arrived, his cane tapping, a grin spreading as he saw the spread. You didn't have to go all out, he said, settling into a chair, his eyes warm with gratitude. They ate, laughed, Milo telling stories about school, the room cozy with the glow of their makeshift family. After dessert, chocolate cake Milo had helped frost, Milo stood, bouncing with excitement. We got a birthday gift for you, Raymond, he announced, his grin wide. Eleanor nodded, her heart pounding. It's a special one. Hold on. She stepped to the living room, where Tucker waited, his face pale but resolute. Come out, she whispered, and he followed. Raymond looked up, confusion knitting his brow as Tucker stepped into the light. Milo beamed. This is Tucker, but you know him as Tommy. Your son. Raymond froze, his fork clattering to the plate. His eyes locked on Tucker, recognition dawning, and then he was on his feet, his cane forgotten. Tears streamed down his weathered face as he stumbled forward, pulling Tucker into a fierce hug. Tommy, he choked out, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, son. I've missed you every damn day. I'm sorry for everything. I was a fool, leaving you and your mom. Tucker's arms hesitated, then wrapped around his father, his own eyes glistening. I hated you for so long, he admitted, his voice thick. But I missed you too, Dad. They held each other, tears falling freely, words of regret and forgiveness tumbling out. Eleanor and Milo watched, her hand on his shoulder, her own eyes wet with the beauty of it. The apartment, small and worn, felt vast with love, a space where broken things, cars, families, hearts, could be mended. The evening unfolded like a warm quilt, each story and laugh stitching Raymond, Tucker, Elena and Milo closer together. Over plates of chicken and cornbread, they shared pieces of their lives, the candlelight casting soft shadows on the apartment's peeling walls. Eleanor, her voice steady but warm, told the story of how she knew Tucker, his unexpected stand at Serena's wedding, the way he'd called out her family's cruelty and given her a moment of being seen. "Never thought I'd be the one to bring you two back together," she said, a small smile playing on her lips as she looked at Tucker and Raymond. "Life's funny like that," Raymond chuckled, his eyes crinkling. "Funny ain't the half of it. You're a miracle worker, Elena." Tucker nodded, his gaze soft with gratitude, his hand resting near his father's on the table. As the night wound down, stories gave way to quiet contentment. Tucker and Raymond exchanged numbers, promising to meet again soon, their voices thick with the tentative hope of rebuilding what was lost. When they left, Raymond's cane tapping softly, Tucker's arm steadying him, Eleanor tucked Milo into bed, his sleepy smile lingering from the joy of the evening. She kissed his forehead, the apartment silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. Alone, Elena sat at her small desk, a cracked mug of tea in her hands, and let her thoughts drift. Life was a strange, winding thing. Tucker, the man who'd stood up for her when her family tore her down, had become the son of Raymond, the stranger whose kindness had sparked a new chapter. She'd been the bridge between them, her own pain and resilience weaving their stories together. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd lost her family to their greed and judgment, but in their absence she'd found something truer, something hers. Raymond became a constant in Elena and Milo's lives. He'd show up with a bag of tomatoes from his garden, teasing Milo about eating his greens, or sit with Elena over coffee, listening to her dreams of finishing her bookkeeping course. To Milo, he was a grandpa, teaching him to plant seeds and telling tales of battleships under starry skies. To Eleanor, he was a father figure, his quiet wisdom and unwavering support filling a void Ben's death had left. Raymond and Tucker too mended their bond, meeting for fishing trips or long talks, rebuilding trust one memory at a time. Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't known in years, a sense of being loved, protected, valued not for what she could offer but for who she was. Her days were still hard, the diner shifts long, the bills relentless, but they were lighter now, buoyed by Raymond's gruff encouragement, Milo's laughter, and the occasional call from Tucker, checking in like family. She'd built a home, not of blood, but of choice, its foundations stronger than the silk and champagne of her past. As she sipped her tea, the photo of Raymond and young Tommy, now Tucker, sat on her desk, a reminder of what she'd helped heal. She thought of Ben, his unconditional love alive in her choices, and smiled. Eleanor was enough, not just for Milo but for